A strange video from Northern Ireland blew up online. It showed a huge wall of basalt opening like a giant gate. It stayed open for just 2 seconds before closing again, so perfectly that there wasn't even a mark on the rock. But in those few seconds, drone footage seemed to capture something stepping out of the darkness behind it. People immediately started guessing what it was, or rather, who it was. But the truth had been out there all along. The video shows the Giant's Causeway, located in the north coast of County Antrim in Northern Ireland. Around 1 million people visit this place every year, and it's easy to see why. It's considered one of the most stunning natural landmarks on Earth because, well, it doesn't look natural at all. The area is made up of around 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, and they look almost too perfect to be real. Most of them are hexagonal, with edges so precise that they seem man-made. It looks like someone used the same tool to cut every stone, repeating the exact same shape over and over. In some places, the columns rise so high that they look like enormous stone walls, but they weren't built by people. These rocks tell the story of a series of geological events that began around 60 million years ago, at the start of the Paleogene period. Back then, the ancient continent of Laurasia was breaking apart, opening the North Atlantic Ocean and triggering intense volcanic activity. Lava poured through cracks in the Earth's crust and spread across the landscape. After several eruptions, the area went quiet for a long time. But when volcanic activity returned, lava filled a deep valley in the Giant's Causeway, forming a huge lava lake nearly 300 feet deep. As the lava cooled slowly, it hardened, shrank, and cracked in regular patterns. Those cracks divided the rock into thousands of tightly packed columns, which is why they look so strangely geometric. So, as mysterious as the Giant's Causeway may seem, it was actually formed by cooling lava millions of years ago. That's a pretty cool explanation, but not everyone is satisfied with it. After all, the local legend is even more fascinating. According to Irish folklore, the Giant's Causeway was built by a giant named Fionn Mac Cumhaill, better known as Finn McCool. The story says Finn lived in Northern Ireland. Across the Irish Sea, in Scotland, lived another giant named Benandonner. When Benandonner threatened Ireland, Finn responded by ripping huge chunks of rock from the Antrim coast and throwing them into the sea. Those rocks formed a path across the water, the Giant's Causeway, so Finn could cross the sea and confront him. But that turns out to be a terrible idea because Benandonner is enormous, much bigger than Finn. Realizing he's in trouble, Finn runs back to Ireland. His clever wife then comes up with a quick plan and disguises him as a baby. So, when Benandonner arrives and sees this gigantic baby, he thinks that if the child is that big, the father must be absolutely massive. Terrified, Benandonner rushes back to Scotland. As he runs, he tears up the causeway behind him, making sure Finn can't follow. And according to the legend, that's why only parts of the Giant's Causeway remain today. So, why am I telling you this whole legend? Because apparently, the drone footage I mentioned at the beginning of the video caught a glimpse of Finn McCool himself, closing the stone wall. As if the giant had been living inside the basalt columns all this time. And it didn't take long for all kinds of theories, stories, and supposed follow-up discoveries to start spreading online. Out of all of them, 2 versions of the story became especially popular. Here's version number 1. Archaeologists were really intrigued by the footage, and they needed answers. At first, they thought the stone slab might have moved because of natural forces like pressure from the soil, unstable rock, or even seismic activity. but the way it opened and closed so perfectly, almost exactly like a door, didn't seem to fit any of those explanations. So, a few weeks after the video went viral, they decided to open the ancient structure. And according to this version of the story, what they found inside shocked both researchers and locals. When a professional excavation team carefully removed the basalt column, they reportedly found a hidden chamber. Inside, they found artifacts, organic remains, and carvings that appeared to be connected to early medieval burial practices. But the way everything had been arranged was highly unusual. They also found symbols carved into the stone walls. The problem was, some of them didn't match any known traditional markings from the area. Others looked similar to protective or ritual symbols linked to ancient Celtic traditions. But what did they actually mean? No one could say for sure. The findings also suggested that the chamber may have been opened and sealed again several times throughout history, which is very strange to say the least. Then there's the second popular version. According to this story, Ireland's moving stone door had been hiding a forbidden secret for centuries. When researchers finally managed to get inside, they found something no one expected. Something that supposedly couldn't be explained and raised disturbing new questions about the past. But what exactly was this forbidden secret? Once again, no one could say for sure. Both versions sound pretty mysterious, which is why they quickly caught people's attention online. News-style posts started appearing. Reddit users began searching for answers and sharing their theories, and some YouTube videos even claimed to show footage of the supposed excavations. Now, I don't mean to disappoint you, but none of that was true. I mean, the Giant's Causeway and the hexagonal basalt columns are real, of course, but the video of the stone wall opening, the excavations, the hidden chamber, and the artifacts were all fake. To this day, there's no reliable evidence that archaeologists ever found a moving stone door in Ireland, opened it, and discovered some shocking or forbidden secret inside. And when you look into the case more closely, the warning signs are pretty obvious. None of the posts mentioned any actual researchers, universities, or archaeological groups connected to the supposed discovery. But it's not like someone was actually trying to make the whole world believe it was real. The truth had been out there the entire time. People just had to look for it. Apparently, the video was created as part of a promotional campaign for the Giant's Causeway by the National Trust in Northern Ireland. And when you watch the original video, it's pretty clear that it's some kind of advertisement. The footage was first posted back in 2015 with the hashtag #NTSleepingGiant, and it never claimed to be real. It was simply meant to be a fun idea. At the time, staff at the Giant's Causeway even gave visitors a map and clues to help them find the cave featured in the promotional video. The whole idea behind posting the video online was to make people curious enough to visit the site and see the basalt columns for themselves. So, did it work for you? Even without the mysterious video, the Giant's Causeway is still a fascinating place to visit. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1986 because of its geological importance and what it can teach us about the natural processes that shaped our planet. In fact, scientists have been studying these rock formations for around 300 years, and what they have learned has helped shape modern geology. And that's especially interesting because although the Giant's Causeway is one of the most famous examples, these hexagonal rock formations can also be found in places like Namibia, Iceland, and even the US. That means you may not have to travel all the way to Northern Ireland to see these incredible columns up close. Unless, of course, you want to make sure Finn McCool isn't still hiding somewhere in there.
In 1925, a British explorer named Percy Fawcett stepped into the Amazon rainforest and never stepped back out. He brought his son, Jack, and his son's best friend, Raleigh. The three of them were chasing a legend, a hidden city faucet called Z. They were never seen again. Nobody managed to find their camp nor their bodies. Just one of the most famous disappearances in the history of exploration. For about 100 years, Z stayed exactly what it sounded like, a myth. Most scientists assumed the Amazon simply couldn't have hidden a real civilization. And the reasons for that were numerous. The soil was too poor to sustain large numbers of people. The floods came too often, plus the area is full of diseases. Think of all the exotic mosquitoes and other dangerous creatures that can end a human life with one seemingly innocent bite. With all of that stacked against them, it seemed obvious that nothing more than small, scattered communities could ever have survived under that canopy. But that assumption just collapsed, all thanks to one smart laser system. Researchers have started flying drones equipped with LiDAR, short for light detection and ranging, over the Amazon. LiDAR fires millions of laser pulses at the ground and measures what bounces back, which lets scientists digitally strip away leaves, branches, and entire trees from the data. What's left is the bare earth underneath. And underneath that jungle, it turns out, was indeed a civilization. Some experts now believe they may finally be finding the lost civilization Fawcett spent his life searching for. Except this time, they're doing it by piloting a drone instead of hacking through vines. Think about that for a second. An obsession that drove a man to his death in the jungle, one that turned into a near mythical footnote in exploration history, might actually have had a real answer all along. Not buried gold, not a fantasy kingdom, but something arguably more interesting. An entire engineered society that modern science had, until recently, also assumed was impossible. The discovery centers on a region of northern Bolivia called Llanos de Mochos. Long before Europeans arrived, this area was home to a culture archaeologists call the Causeway, who thrived there from roughly 500 to 1400 CE. What the LiDAR scans revealed wasn't just one settlement, it was more of a layered network. The Causeway built 4 different tiers of towns, ranging from small outposts to massive regional hubs. The biggest of these primary settlements covered close to 200 square miles. To get the perspective, it's about the size of Atlanta, Georgia. Zoom out further and the full network of causeways, canals, reservoirs, and farmland sprawls across nearly 1,730 square miles, bigger than the state of Rhode Island. Inside that footprint stood canonical pyramids climbing about 65 feet into the sky, along with massive U-shaped ceremonial platforms and open plazas that likely once hosted gatherings, rituals, or trade. In sheer scale, these structures are said to rival the famous Tiwanaku civilization of the Andes, one of the great powerhouse cultures of pre-Columbian South America. To put that in perspective, this wasn't a village with a few mud huts and a fence around it. This was infrastructure on a level that took real planning, real labor, and real long-term coordination to pull off. But here's where it gets genuinely strange, compared to what most of us picture when we hear ancient city. There's no dense downtown core, no tightly packed grid of streets the way you'd find in, say, ancient Rome or Tenochtitlan. Instead, the Causeway spread themselves out across the landscape, yet they were all stitched together by shared infrastructure, especially elaborate water management systems. Specialists describe the whole layout as clearly planned and coordinated, designed not just as living space, but as a way to connect an entire regional population. Strikingly, similar urban logic shows up at ancient Maya cities in Central America and at Angkor in Cambodia, suggesting this spread out but connected model of city building might be far more common in history than we ever assumed. So how did a society manage to thrive in a place written off as too hostile to support one? The answer is almost the opposite of survival. It's engineering. Rather than being limited by their environment, the Causeway re-engineered it. They invented something known as Amazonian dark earth, a custom-made, fertile soil produced by mixing charcoal, bone, and organic waste into the rainforest's naturally weak ground. Over centuries, this transformed unusable land into farmland capable of feeding large, settled populations. They didn't stop there. The Causeway reclaimed vast stretches of seasonally flooded grassland, building raised and drained agricultural fields that could be farmed reliably instead of being swallowed by water every rainy season. They dug extensive drainage canals and grew staple crops like maize at a scale nobody expected from people once dismissed as primitive rainforest dwellers. The Amazon, far from being a wilderness that people simply endured, was something they actively reshaped to their advantage, turning a supposed obstacle into the very foundation their society was built on. If Llanos de Mojos were an isolated case, it might be written off as a fluke. It isn't. Similar LiDAR surveys in Ecuador's Opano Valley have revealed thousands of ancient structures linked by organized road networks. Researchers have also turned up ceremonial earthworks and geometric enclosures across Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. Across the entire Amazon basin, the same story keeps repeating. What looked like empty jungle from the ground turns out to be a heavily engineered, densely populated landscape from above. While satellites and drones are rewriting the science from the sky, there are also people willing to walk straight into the jungle and check the data by hand. Much like Fawcett once did, just with considerably better tools. A team of researchers spotted unusual LiDAR imagery from the Amazon and became convinced it showed the remains of an undiscovered civilization. After raising funds to support an expedition, they spent 2 weeks trekking through the dense jungle, surviving partly on piranha they had caught by hand. In heat indexes pushing 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Progress was painfully slow. Take a step, cut through the brush, take another step, cut more brush, over and over, for miles. The jungle was so thick that if someone walking ahead got just a few steps out in front, they'd vanish completely from view. Even with GPS, a tool Fawcett never had, the team still got lost more than once and had to backtrack to find their way out. Despite the brutal conditions, the team returned with evidence they believe supports the idea that the structures they found are genuinely pre-Columbian. Built before European contact ever reached that part of the rainforest. Formal verification is still pending, but the researchers are already planning a return trip, hoping not just to confirm the find, but to give something back to the local community that helped guide them along the way, including repairing a village well and its power supply. Plenty of mysteries still remain. Researchers don't yet fully understand how societies like the Causeway organize themselves politically, or what ultimately caused their decline centuries before Europeans ever set foot in the region. Shifting climate, environmental strain, internal conflict, or disrupted trade routes are all candidates. But no single explanation has been confirmed, and it's possible several of these pressures hit at once. What this discovery really does is force a complete rewrite of how we think about the Amazon altogether. It wasn't a green void waiting to be tamed. It was once home to organized, engineered, and densely connected societies, who simply got buried by time and vegetation. Every new survey seems to confirm that this wasn't a one-time fluke of human ingenuity, but a pattern that repeated itself across an enormous stretch of the continent, hidden in plain sight for centuries. And the tools now uncovering them are only getting more powerful, which means a lot more of this hidden history is likely still waiting beneath the canopy, completely visible from the ground, but no longer invisible from above. Deep in Petra's Red Cliffs, archaeologists found a hidden tomb. Inside, there were 12 skeletons. They remained untouched for over 2,000 years, and that's a really weird thing. Most tombs in Petra have been looted, so what makes this find stand out? Let's figure it out. This is the ancient city of Petra. Its huge sandstone cliffs are hard to forget. No wonder it's one of the new 7 wonders of the world. The buildings here are carved straight into the rock, and it already makes the place look unreal. But Petra has also been a star in the archaeology world for a long time. Once, Petra appeared in the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Some scenes were filmed right in front of the famous building called Al-Causeway, or the Treasury. But recently, something even more exciting happened there in real life. A TV team from the show Expedition Unknown came to Petra to film a new investigation. And while they were there, archaeologists made a huge discovery. They found 12 human skeletons and several ancient objects. All of them were buried under the ground in front of the treasury, hidden there for about 2,000 years. Archaeologists didn't start digging right away. First, they used a special tool called ground-penetrating radar, something like an X-ray for the ground. Instead of guessing where to dig, the machine scans underground and shows shapes that might be tombs or empty spaces. Anyway, when the team looked at the radar data, something interesting showed up. The patterns looked very similar to places in Petra where tombs had already been found before. That was a big clue that something might be hiding underground. After seeing the results, the authorities of Jordan gave permission for the excavation. That's when the team finally started digging under the famous site. And that's how they uncovered the skeletons and ancient artifacts. Interestingly, many tombs in Petra have been found completely empty, because over the centuries, anything valuable was taken by looters, or simply disappeared with time. But this tomb was very different. Inside, the team discovered 12 human skeletons and a few ancient objects. Some of the bones even had mold on them. That happened because Petra is carved into sandstone cliffs. Sandstone is quite porous, which means it can soak up water like a giant sponge. The area sometimes floods, and moisture likely slowly made its way into the tomb. Along with the skeletons, the archaeologists found stuff made of bronze, iron, and ceramic. One object stood out: a ceramic chalice resting in the arms of one of the buried people. It was almost as if the person had been holding it when they were laid to rest. Mysteriously, the cup looked a lot like the Holy Grail from the Indiana Jones movie. The famous building above the tomb, the Al-Causeway, stands near the main entrance to the city. It's believed to be at least 2,000 years old. This huge structure is carved directly into the sandstone cliffs. Today, it's one of the most recognizable landmarks in the world. But even though the treasury is so famous, archaeologists still don't fully understand its history. One reason is that many of the nearby tombs didn't contain many artifacts. And without things to study, it becomes much harder to figure out exactly when the building was made or how it was used. That's why the team was so excited. The discovery could help them learn more about the ancient people who lived in Petra and built the city. The location of the tomb might already be an important clue. You see, being buried right in front of the treasury was probably a huge honor. The human remains themselves could also tell an interesting story. The skeletons were still lying in their original positions without being moved around or disturbed by looters. That's why scientists can study them much more carefully to learn things like how old these people were, how they lived, or if they were healthy. We could also learn more about the place those people called home, the ancient city of Petra. It was built more than 2,000 years ago by the Nabateans. Starting around the 4th century BCE, this desert city became the center of their kingdom and an important stop for trade across the Middle East. The location helped a lot. Petra sits in a valley surrounded by mountains, and the main entrance is a long, narrow canyon called the Al-Sik. Because the path is so tight, the city was easy to defend and hard for enemies to attack. Thanks to these factors, the city grew quickly. At its peak, around 30,000 people may have lived there, but the city sits in a dry desert canyon. Natural water is kinda limited there. So how did so many people live in Petra? The answer is clever engineering. The Nabateans built a water system that was incredibly advanced for its time. They didn't rely on one water source. It was a whole network carved directly into the rock. They cut channels, pipes, and storage tanks into the cliffs. This helped them guide water from nearby springs into the city. It was like an ancient plumbing system built entirely out of stone. Even better, the water didn't just flow straight into the city. First, it passed through special settling basins where dirt and sand could sink to the bottom. After that, the water was stored in large reservoirs surrounded by thick stone walls, which helped keep the water cooler in the desert heat. Flash floods were also a big danger in the canyon. When heavy rain fell in the surrounding mountains, water often rushed down the narrow valleys. To deal with that, the Nabateans built dams and channels that redirected the floodwater into storage reservoirs. Another intriguing thing about Petra is the location of its main buildings. In 2013, researchers found that several important monuments lined up with the sun during key moments of the year, like the solstices and equinoxes. Scientists now believe that the buildings may have worked like giant calendars, helping people track the seasons in a desert landscape. Natural signs of time can be hard to notice there. Another Petra mystery is three massive stone blocks, the Jinn blocks. They go back to around the 2nd century BCE and are some of the first big tombs built in Petra. Two of them have burial chambers inside, and the third one even has a grave on top, like a little rooftop coffin. No one really knows exactly why they were built. Most experts say they were tombs, but some think they may have been carved to honor deities or used in rituals. But however great Petra was, things started to change in 106 CE. That's when the powerful Roman Empire took control of the city and made it part of their territory. Trade didn't completely stop, but the city slowly lost some of its importance. Later, a large earthquake in 551 CE caused serious damage to the area. It could have been the final blow for a city that was already in decline. Over time, Petra was eventually abandoned and became known as the Lost City. But there's another nickname people used much more often, the Rose City. The name comes from the color of the cliffs around Petra. The sandstone rocks have a reddish-pink color, especially when the sun is low in the sky. What tourists see today is just a tiny slice of Petra. Some estimates say archaeologists have only dug up about 15% of the city. Visitors go through the narrow Seek, gape at the 130-foot-high treasury, walk along tomb-lined streets, and climb over 800 steps to reach the monastery, Al-Dir. But that's like seeing the tip of an iceberg. The rest is still buried. Petra keeps surprising us. In 2016, researchers used satellite images to spot a huge, previously unknown monument. The platform is massive, about 184 by 161 feet, and has columns along one side. Pottery fragments suggest it's over 2,150 years old. So basically, even after centuries of exploration, Petra is still full of secrets. They're just waiting to be uncovered. 40,000 years ago, someone scratched a few tiny lines and dots onto a piece of bone, and that little mark might be the oldest hard drive humanity ever created. Scientists now believe those Ice Age people weren't just doodling, but recording real information, structured, organized, repeatable data. And this discovery completely shifts the timeline of human intelligence. For decades, archaeologists kept finding strange symbols carved into Stone Age tools and sculptures. Those were simple shapes like crosses, dots, short lines, and tiny notches cut into bone or ivory. Explorers kept finding them in caves across Europe, including Germany, France, and Spain. They showed up on carved animal figurines, tools, and ornaments. Archaeologists dated them to be about 34,000 to 45,000 years old. That means people created these symbols during the Ice Age, when glaciers covered huge chunks of the planet, and mammoths still wandered the plains. For a long time, researchers believed these signs meant nothing in particular, maybe decorations, maybe tribal art. But a new computational study led by a linguist and an archaeologist showed it was more about data than decoration. The team analyzed more than 3,000 individual symbols carved into around 260 artifacts. They studied every mark and fed them into statistical models, the same type of mathematics researchers use to study language patterns or train artificial intelligence. The goal wasn't to translate the signs yet. Nobody knows exactly what they mean. Instead, the scientists looked at something called information density, which means how much meaningful data you can store in a sequence of symbols. When the researchers ran the numbers, they saw that the symbol sequences had almost the same information density as proto-cuneiform. That's the earliest writing system known from ancient Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE. It was roughly 40,000 years later. So, some signs in these Ice Age carvings repeat again and again in predictable ways: cross, 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 line, line, dot. That repetition resembles early data encoding, where patterns repeat because they store structured information. The researchers also analyzed the entropy of the coded messages. Entropy measures how unpredictable a sequence is. High entropy means lots of possible combinations, like a complex password. Low entropy means predictable repetition, and it looks like the Ice Age symbol systems have entropy levels very close to early proto-cuneiform tablets. That means the amount of information those carvings could store roughly matches the earliest writing records from the first cities. It proves that humans didn't just suddenly invent writing out of nowhere 5,000 years ago. Instead, humans spent tens of thousands of years experimenting with symbolic encoding systems and gradually increased their complexity until true writing was finally invented. One of the most interesting examples of such a coded message comes from a cave in southwestern Germany. Archaeologists discovered a tiny mammoth figurine carved from mammoth tusk ivory, small enough to fit in your palm. There's a neat row of engraved crosses and dots running along its surface. Another object, called the adorant, is a thin ivory plate. Found in a different German cave, has a strange mythical creature that looks part human, part lion on it. The figure stretches upward like it's worshipping something, and across its body, someone carved rows of tiny dots and notches with careful spacing. Then there's the famous lion-human sculpture. If you look at the arm closely, you can see evenly spaced cuts along the limb. These marks seem intentional, deliberate, almost rhythmic. They look less like decoration and more like entries in a ledger. It makes those artifacts something like USB drives made of ivory. And because these ancient USB drives appear in different regions of Germany and in other parts of Europe, it could mean that Ice Age humans may have shared such symbolic messages across huge distances. Those hunter-gatherers living thousands of miles apart probably recognized the same patterns scratched into bone tools. Of course, scientists still don't know the exact meaning of these symbols. They could represent seasonal calendars, migration cycles, clan markers, or some concepts tied to rituals. So the most important discovery for now isn't the translation, but the structure of the signs that behave like a system. This coding system isn't the only proof that ancient minds invented complex systems long before modern technology arrived. There's a thick oval slab of limestone in a museum in the Netherlands. Archaeologists dug it up in the late 1800s and assumed it was some kind of Roman game board. The problem was that nobody could figure out the rules. The carved lines didn't match any known ancient game. Only in 2026, researchers finally solved the mystery with help from artificial intelligence. If you look at the stone closely, you can see that certain grooves on it are slightly deeper than others. It means that people slid pieces across those lines repeatedly, and the stone wore down over time. Conservation experts created extremely detailed 3D scans of the limestone surface to analyze those wear patterns. Those scans showed differences in depth smaller than a human hair. Every tiny groove became a clue about how players once moved their pieces. Then, the team brought in a special AI game simulation system designed to understand board games. They fed the system rules from about 100 historical games and asked it to test possibilities onto a digital copy of the Roman board. The AI played thousands of simulated matches against itself and tried different rule combinations each time. For every rule set, it tracked where the pieces moved and compared those paths to the wear patterns on the real stone. It repeated this process around 1,000 times per rule set until finally certain patterns started lining up perfectly. The system narrowed all the possibilities to a small group of related blocking games. In this type of strategy game, two players move pieces along fixed paths, trying to trap the opponent's pieces in corners or dead ends. If you've ever played tic-tac-toe or checkers, you already understand the basic idea. To control space, predict the opponent's next move, and close the trap. The simulations showed that the Romans most likely played this game with small tokens made of glass, bone, or pottery sliding along those carved grooves. And that discovery matters more than you might think. Historians used to believe blocking games appeared in early medieval Europe, centuries after the Roman Empire collapsed. But this limestone board showed them that such games existed nearly 1,000 years earlier. So, Roman players had strategy games that helped them develop forward planning, recognizing patterns, and thinking of different combinations and possibilities. Now let's travel even further back in time, long before Roman cities and writing of any kind. Our destination, Olduvai Gorge in northern Tanzania, one of the oldest important archaeological sites on Earth. In 2025, researchers studying the area found something unexpected in ancient sediments. It was a set of tools made from the limb bones of elephants and hippos. And these tools date back about 1.5 million years. Scientists found 27 bone tools, some nearly 15 inches long, shaped into sharp blades. Early humans most likely used them on animal carcasses or to process tough materials. At first glance, they seem simple, but it actually looks like the toolmakers shaped these bones using knapping, the same process used to chip stone tools. Knapping means striking a material carefully so that small flakes break away, gradually forming a sharp edge. Bone behaves very differently from stone. It contains collagen, which makes it slightly flexible and elastic. Hit the bone too hard and it shatters unpredictably. Hit it too softly and nothing happens. That means whoever made these tools understood how the material worked. They adapted their technique to shape bone without destroying it. Archaeologists believe Homo erectus, an early human species with body proportions similar to ours, created these implements. It also looks like the toolmakers preferred thick limb bones, which are the strongest parts of animal skeleton. To make that choice, you need to understand anatomy and material strength. Engineers today still use that same logic when choosing materials for machines. When we put all these discoveries together, we see that our ancestors designed systems, invented technologies, stored information, and played complex games long before modern civilization appeared. So we didn't just suddenly become intelligent. We've been building knowledge for tens of thousands of years. The Tower of London is the ultimate symbol of royal power. For nearly 1,000 years, it housed kings, queens, and the crown jewels. It served as a fortress, palace, and prison. It is one of the most studied and documented historic sites in the world. Yet, archaeologists uncovered unsettling human remains only 10 feet right under the walkway. Who were these people, and how did they stay hidden for so long? The Tower of London sits on the River Thames, in the heart of London. It's a true medieval castle with thick, well-preserved stone walls, armored gates, and watchtowers like you only see in movies. It was built almost a millennium ago, when William the Conqueror took control of England. He needed a fortress to lock the city down and send the message, "The new king is here, so better behave." The entire castle complex covers 18 acres, which is about the exact size of the White House grounds. It still keeps and displays the crown jewels under guard. The Citadel was also a high-security prison for centuries, holding high-profile prisoners locked away. But it wasn't just a prison for humans. For centuries, the tower was a royal zoo filled with lions, elephants, and leopards. The King of Norway even sent a polar bear, which was allowed to swim in the Thames on a long leash to catch fish. One of the biggest attractions is the White Tower, a massive stone keep. Rising about 90 feet, it had been the tallest building in all of London for hundreds of years. Kings famously whitewashed the stones to make them gleam. It stood out like a blinding beacon above the dark, muddy city. Another must-see spot is the Chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, the tower's historic church. It served as the final resting place for famous prisoners and nobles alike. It was just outside of this very chapel that archaeologists made a chilling discovery. The mystery started in 2019 when a routine check uncovered 2 burials. When archaeologists returned to dig some more in 2025, the situation grew from unexpected to, hey, what is going on here? Over 20 skeletons were packed into the soil, mixed with fragments from older burials, proving this spot had been used and reused many times before. These graves span centuries, from the 1200s to the 1600s. So we're not looking at one tragedy. It seems to be a place that kept getting used again and again throughout medieval London. One situation feels like it's from a horror movie. A cluster of at least 6 people from the 1300s that looks unusually messy compared to the others. The timing lines up with the era of the Black Death in London, so this group could be plague-related. But researchers are careful with conclusions for now. On the other hand, some graves look the opposite of rushed. They look expensive. Several people were buried in coffins. In one case, the wood had rotted away completely, leaving behind a perfect shadow of a coffin stamped into the clay. The report says this coffin shadow likely held a juvenile buried in the 1200s. Then there's the chapel itself that might give us some clues. The current building is basically the newest version on this same spot. It's possible that there were 3 or 4 earlier chapels here, and the dig even exposed lost walls and an old floor surface deep down. But what else can we learn about these people? Here's where science can help. Researchers look at teeth. Your adult teeth form when you're a kid, and they lock in chemical traces from the water you drink and the food you ate. It basically creates a permanent record of where you grew up. So the team analyzed 2 specific skeletons. The first one seemed wealthier. The chemistry suggests they might have grown up in Wales and moved around a few times. They even had traces of a high-sugar diet. That was a huge luxury back then. The second person had a totally different story. Their bones showed signs of chronic stress and a much harder childhood. So these were 2 people from opposite ends of the social ladder. One rich and the other not so much. But they both ended up near each other to be discovered centuries later. Millions of people visit the Tower of London every year. They take selfies and walk the grounds, totally unaware that they might be standing on top of massive tombs. And that forces you to ask the obvious question. If a place this famous can hide ancient graveyards, what else is out there? Because the tower is definitely not the only landmark keeping secrets. In 2019, the fire at Notre Dame forced a massive rebuild. That construction forced workers to lift parts of the floor and reveal a spooky secret. Several tombs hiding 2 human-shaped lead sarcophagi, sealed like metal time capsules. And inside, there were details that shouldn't survive: fabric, hair, and even leaves that were left on the head. This stuff points to an important person. It sounds unbelievable, but they managed to identify the person as Antoine de la Porte, a church official who passed away in 1710. The second coffin became its own mini detective story. Scientists nicknamed the man inside the Horseman because his bones showed signs of riding for years. Some new analysis suggests that he could have been Joachim du Bellay, a well-known poet from the 1500s. So, we have secret graves in London and Paris. That part almost makes sense. These are old, crowded cities where people have lived for centuries. But there's one place on Earth where history wasn't supposed to happen at all. Antarctica. Yes, almost literally the edge of the world with nothing human anywhere nearby for hundreds of miles. And still, in 1985, a Chilean scientist found human remains on an ice-free beach in Livingston Island on a spot now called Yamana Beach. A human skull in Antarctica sounds impossible, but the dates make it worse. When the remains were studied, the person appeared to be a young woman around 21, likely from the southern Chilean channels. She passed away in the early sealing area, roughly 1819 to 1825. That's basically the opening minutes of humans showing up in that region. So why would a young woman end up there? One idea is that she might have come with early sealers, maybe as a guide or part of the crew. The original researcher even suggested she could have been abandoned there for unknown reasons. Plus, the spot where they found her is known to have been visited by early 19th century sealers. The pieces fit together somewhat, but no one can really pin down the story. And it gets even stranger. The first discovery in 1985 was her skull, but later researchers came back to the same area and found more human bones. In 1988 and again in 1993, they recovered 2 femurs, basically thigh bones, near the original site. The big question is obvious. Were those bones from the same person, or did more than one person pass away here? The plan was to use DNA testing to check if the femurs matched the skull. If these 3 sites prove anything, it's that new discoveries could be anywhere. But the really exciting part is daydreaming about where we could go next. We are entering a phase where technology could make history feel like time travel. Think about what we can do with the gathered data. We can already pull DNA from a tooth to find out what someone ate or where they grew up. Maybe one day we could take that biological code and use AI to completely recreate a person. Imagine a digital human that looks just like them, with the right eye color, skin texture, and even scars. Then we combine that with the environment. Laser scanning allows us to map every inch of those buried foundations. If you feed that into a physics engine, you can rebuild the walls that fell down 500 years ago. That means in our lifetime, you might not just visit the Tower of London to see it as it is right now. You could strap on a headset and step inside the chapel as it looked in 1348, being face to face with history, just without the bad smells or the risk of catching the plague. They finally did it. After 300 years of searching, archaeologists pinned down the location of the lost land of the white jaguar, the city of Maya hidden in the wild jungles of Mexico. It all kicked off back in the 1500s with the Lacandon Maya. These guys were some super tough survivors who just didn't quit. When their main capital, Lacamtun, fell to the Spanish in 1586, most people would have called it game over. But not the Lacandon. Nope, they packed up, headed deeper into the rainforest, and built their last stronghold, Sakbalan. It was a hidden fortress of stone temples, twisty jungle trails, and howler monkeys acting like noisy little guards. For over 100 years, the Lacandon managed to keep their traditions alive there, far from European control. Then, in 1695, history came crashing in. A Spanish friar named Diego de Ribas stumbled into Sakbalan. And yeah, that was basically the beginning of the end. Soon after, the Spanish took over. By 1721, the Maya had abandoned Sakbalan. The jungle didn't waste time. It swallowed the place whole, with roots tearing into walls and vines smothering plazas. The city didn't just disappear, it got eaten alive. For the next 300 years, Sakbalan turned into more of a myth than a memory. A name archaeologists and explorers would whisper, secretly hoping to find it one day. Plenty of expeditions tried to track it down, but the rainforest is sneaky. Every path looks identical, maps fall apart in the humidity, and even GPS can't cut through the thick green ceiling. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was alive, covered in thorns, and yeah, crawling with jaguars that would happily make you lunch. So how did the scientists crack the mystery? One word: a letter from the 17th century. The letter by Diego de Ribas described all the routes, rivers, and trails leading to Sac Balan. It showed in every detail the journey of the soldiers who walked 4 days to the Lacuntun River after leaving Sac Balan. Then they sailed for 2 days and arrived at the church El Encuentro de Cristo, left their canoes, and continued on foot to Lake Petén Itzá in Guatemala. This was already detailed enough, but the scientists needed to pinpoint the exact location with geographic information systems. They took into account vegetation layers and how much each person was carrying to map an approximate range where Sac Balan should be. They fed this information to GIS and calculated where the city should be. And bingo, it worked. Archaeologists traveled through the jungle and found stone temples rising like broken teeth from the earth. There were also some tools and ceramics, and a Spanish church right in the middle of the ruins. The discovery isn't just about cool ruins, it rewrites history. For decades, people assumed the Lacandons simply scattered after Lacamtun fell, but Sac Balan proves they regrouped, fought, and preserved their culture for over a century more. It's like discovering the final chapter of a book we thought ended too soon. There's also irony here. The Spanish friar who revealed Sac Balan helped doom it. Yet his letter, centuries later, also helped save its memory. Today, the ruins sit inside a biosphere reserve, protected by the same jungle that once hid them. Tourists can't just waltz in. It's raw, tangled, alive. The city breathes again, but on its own terms. Scientists just uncovered another lost city, buried under the thick jungles of Mexico. It had been hiding there for 600 years. The place is called Gengola, and it's massive, about 360 hectares with more than 1,100 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, its own network of roads, and a super organized city plan. Because it was so deep in the jungle, you'd never realize how huge it really was unless you spent years hiking through it. But modern tech swooped in to save the day, using LiDAR, a kind of laser scanning tool. Researchers flew over the site, and in just 2 hours, they had a full 3D map of the entire city. Gengola was built sometime between 1350 and 1521, back in pre-Columbian times, and it used to be buzzing with life. It was a major hub for the Zapotec people, who had been around in the region since about 600 BCE. Families there lived in homes with big central patios surrounded by rooms, and as they got new members, they just add more rooms and stretch their houses out. They even used the mountains around them as natural walls and channeled mountain water for drainage. A lot of their buildings are still standing, which is wild considering how much time has passed. By the late 1400s, the Zapotec were real powerhouses along the Pacific coast. They even fought off the Aztecs, who were constantly trying to expand. At Gengola, they survived a brutal 7-month siege. But even though hiding in the mountains kept them safe, it wasn't perfect. They didn't have enough fresh water or farmland to feed everyone. Just 12 miles away, the smaller city of Tehuantepec had what they needed. So the Zapotec moved there right before the Spanish arrived in 1521. What the scientists have seen so far is just scratching the surface. That LiDAR scan revealed more than 1,000 buildings, and archaeologists are planning years of research to figure it all out. Instead of digging everything up and risking damage, they'll use advanced scanning tech to keep studying the city safely. Alright, now let's hop across the world to Egypt, where archaeologists stumbled on a whole lost city called Imet, tucked away in the eastern Nile Delta. The place was buried under layers of mud, water, and time, hiding in a swamp that's been shifting and changing for thousands of years. Scientists first noticed it from way up high in faint little clusters of mud brick foundations in satellite images. The shapes looked shaky and ghost-like, but too neat to be natural. So they followed the patterns down on the ground, started digging, and the city started coming back to life. They found multi-story tower houses, basically mini skyscrapers of the ancient world. They had multiple floors, thick foundations and could handle some serious weight. That kind of vertical living is super rare in Egypt, especially outside the Nile Delta. It showed that people in Imet weren't just spreading across the land, but stacking upward, which means the city was packed, carefully planned, and way more urban than anyone thought for that time. And it wasn't just fancy housing either. Archaeologists also uncovered a grain processing center with paved work areas, animal pens, and organized spaces for food production. Clearly, this was a city with a real economy running behind it. Not far from there, they spotted a ceremonial road that once led to a temple for Wadjet, Imet's patron deity. But later on, other buildings got plunked down over the road, which shows that Wadjet's worship faded over time. Still, the ruins coughed up some amazing relics, a green faience little funerary figurine, and a stela showing Harpocrates perched on crocodiles and gripping snakes. He was the Greek spin on Horus, deity of silence, secrets, and the newborn sun. And there was even a bronze sistrum, an ancient Egyptian musical instrument decorated with twin heads of Hathor. Turns out, Imet was active from around the 4th century BCE onward, stretching from Egypt's late period into the Roman era. Its location along trade routes made it a magnet for merchants and pilgrims visiting Wadjet's temple. So it wasn't just hanging on, it was thriving, connecting, trading, and adapting with the times. And this isn't just another dusty ruin. Imet is giving us a window into everyday life, religion, and urban planning in the Delta, which we've always known way less about compared to the big pyramids and tombs.
Once upon a time, there was a lighthouse so tall that you could spot its beam from 30 miles away. A mysterious tower that was the symbol of wealth and engineering genius, made with stones so giant and heavy that it still makes us gasp. How did they do that? It has survived earthquakes, one after another, until it finally crumbled in the 14th century. Fast forward to today, and archaeologists have just hauled 22 of its colossal blocks off the seafloor. They're putting the tower back together, to be once again admired and explored, but not how you might imagine. The Lighthouse of Alexandria wasn't just a lighthouse, it was the lighthouse of ancient civilizations, one of the longest-standing world wonders. Built around 280 BCE on a tiny island called Pharos, it reached about 330 feet up in the sky. For comparison, that's taller than the Statue of Liberty or Big Ben. Now, keep in mind that this was before cranes, steel beams, or gym enthusiasts, and it becomes awe-inspiring. For sailors, spotting that gleaming tower was like finally seeing your exit sign after hours of driving on the world's most dangerous highway. The lighthouse was a sight for sore eyes because legend says the waters around Pharos were tricky, full of hidden reefs that could smash ships to pieces. Old sources claim it took about 12 years to build, with the price tag being around 800 Athenian talents of silver, which is an ancient unit of weight close to 57 pounds. That means someone had to haul chests holding 23 tons of coins, without a forklift, most likely across the sea. Wow! The lighthouse was so impressive that the word Pharos ended up being used for lighthouses in a bunch of different languages. The structure had a cool three-tier design. It was square at the bottom, octagonal in the middle, and cylindrical on top. On its top, it had a statue, most likely of Zeus or Poseidon. The lighthouse's white limestone exterior was polished with a sun-catching plaster, so it gleamed like a beacon even without fire. At night, things were different. Wood was hard to come by in Egypt, so the fire on top may have been fed with bundles of papyrus roots or even naphtha for a brighter flame. Whatever the fuel, its glow was boosted by a massive polished bronze mirror. Now, bronze mirrors were common back then. It wasn't until the Renaissance, way long after the Pharos had crumbled, that glass-coated mirrors became standard in European lighthouses. During the day, the same mirror could reflect sunlight, and the tower's bright white silhouette, along with the smoke curling up from the fire, would help sailors find their way. Alexandria was one of the biggest ports in the ancient world, filled with merchants, travelers, and messengers, and the lighthouse was its landmark. Now, fun fact, if you're a fan of the Song of Ice and Fire universe, it certainly popped into your mind when reading about the High Tower of Old Town. Some fans speculate that not just the fictional lighthouse, but also the city itself, was directly inspired by Alexandria. And George R.R. Martin's love for ancient wonders doesn't stop there. There's also the Titan of Braavos, and the beloved author confirmed the intentional parallel to the imposing Colossus of Rhodes. For over 1,600 years, the lighthouse stood high against time, storms, wars, and intrigues, just like in the Game of Thrones. But it was finally defeated by nature itself. Sadly, a few major earthquakes during the 14th century brought it down, scattering its massive stones across the seabed. For over 5 centuries, the remains of the lighthouse just sat there under the waves, basically turning into an underwater rock garden. Divers knew about them, but hauling up 60-ton blocks from the sea is a job for a superhero, or a super powerful crane. And, until recently, it was a lot safer to leave them where they were. Alexandria is still, to this day, a busy harbor, and isn't exactly the easiest place for delicate archaeology. In the 1990s, archaeologists started mapping the whole area around Pharos Island. What they found was precision-cut limestone and granite blocks, some still showing carved edges. Over time, more than 100 massive pieces were cataloged, including chunks of columns, statues, and giant building blocks that could only have come from the lighthouse. Finally, in 2025, Egyptian and French teams joined up and brought that super crane along with a team of divers. In a carefully planned operation, they brought up 22 giant slabs from the seabed. There were parts like door lintels, threshold slabs, and a mysterious pylon, speculated to be some kind of monument. Some of those blocks weigh 70 to 80 tons, which is the weight of 20 African elephants. Those giant boulders are on dry land for the first time in over 600 years. But what happens now? Are researchers really about to rebuild the lighthouse like a giant Lego set? Not quite. You can't just stack century-old blocks like that. For starters, no one's 100% sure what the lighthouse of Alexandria really looked like. Yeah, we've got drawings and clues, most famously the tiny images stamped into Roman coins from Alexandria. But they're more like an artist's quick sketch, not quite the blueprints for recreating something down to the last detail. And then there's the missing pieces problem. Those recovered stones are just a fraction of the original structure. Over the centuries, much of the lighthouse's material was repurposed. In fact, the spot where the lighthouse used to stand is now home to the citadel of Causeway, a fortress built right on its old foundations. The fort is not just a symbol of the past, but also a tourist attraction and a recognizable Alexandrian landmark. So, no, Alexandria isn't about to get its legendary tower back. At least not in that way. Instead, these newly recovered stoneworks are headed for conservation labs to be studied. Specialists will clean, stabilize, and document every carved groove and chisel mark. Later, they're likely to head to a museum. After all, it's part of the national treasure. However, that's not the end of the story. We still have the technology on our side that promises a fully recreated and explorable lighthouse, just like it was all those centuries ago. The entire endeavor is called the Pharos Project, and its mission is to turn those hauled massive stones, lintels, thresholds, base slabs, and even a mystery pylon into a complete walk-through digital twin of the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Each piece is getting high-resolution 3D scanning, joining more than 100 fragments already recorded underwater. The goal isn't just a research. The Pharos Project aims to bring back the lighthouse's original look and feel and turn it into a museum. 330-foot-tall structures often have a lot of stairs, and virtual reality is going to be far less painful for my old feet. Museum visitors could walk around its base in augmented reality, while researchers could use the model to test new theories about its structure and function. Hopefully, we'll be able to customize our own atmosphere, dim the lights, and examine the walls just like in a video game. Maybe they'll render pigeons and seagulls to make it even more authentic. We still don't have many details, but the entire thing is being recorded and will be made into a documentary. While we don't have booths to time travel, talented designers can bring the past back to the present. They just need the correct concept art. Sure, nowadays you can recreate almost everything in 3D, but the point here is the authenticity, to put it back together exactly how it was. This is what the Project Pharos wants to achieve. Maybe one day, every ancient world wonder will end up being recreated in a similar way. But there's no reason to stop there. Virtual tourism can save time and money, and while nothing can replace the real experience, visiting authentic locations recreated in virtual reality may be the next best option. Locals are already excited. The Citadel of Causeway is already drawing people, but now Alexandria is about to get the first digital tourist attraction. Soon, anyone with a VR headset can stand on top of this historic wonder, squint while watching the sunset, and finally answer the burning question: is it possible to get exhausted while climbing virtual stairs? And can I customize the soundtrack? Ooh.
Archaeologists just found the remains of a lost city from thousands of years ago, hiding in southeastern Europe. They were sure that it was nothing more than an old defense outpost, but new digs are changing that big time. They now believe the site might actually be the lost capital of an ancient kingdom of Lynkestis that has to do with Alexander the Great, the man who changed history. The ruins are near a small village called Cernobuki in North Macedonia. You can find mentions of them from 1966, but nobody really dug into them until about 15 years ago. At first, they found just a few ruins and thought it was a guard post used to spot Romans coming from the west. But now, a team of scientists went back with high-tech equipment and found proof this place wasn't just a tiny outpost. Researchers managed to look under the ground and found that the Acropolis the ruins sit on, which is a flat hilltop, has enough rooms and infrastructure to host a full-on city inside the fortress walls. It covers about 2.8 hectares and around 10,000 people lived here at its peak. Researchers also found a textile workshop and plenty of artifacts, including a coin from the time of Alexander the Great and with his image, axes, game pieces, and an oil lamp, and even a small ceramic with a heart motif. One of the coolest finds is a reusable clay theater ticket, which was unique to North Macedonia. This means there was also most likely a theater here, and it could be in one of the large buildings. Experts used to think that the city was from the time of King Philip V, but now, thanks to the coin and especially the ancient tools and broken pottery that were found, they believe people might have lived there during the Bronze Age. Lynkestis and the rest of Upper Macedonia had some pretty intense weather with freezing, rainy winters, and super hot summers. Life there wasn't easy, and most of the time, it was all about surviving. The people who lived in the area were mostly nomadic herders, and they had to move around depending on the season. They traveled with their flocks of cattle, goats, and sheep, always looking for the best pasture lands. Back then, Macedonia was kind of like the outsider of the Greek world. It was part Greek, but powerful city-states like Athens and Sparta didn't really accept it. Thanks to this position on the edge, Macedonia had the chance to mix Greek traditions with local culture. Eventually, they took over and changed the whole ancient world under kings like Philip II and Alexander the Great. The new discoveries at Cernobuki show us how connected and powerful ancient Macedonia really was, especially since the city sat along trade routes to Constantinople. Big historical figures like Octavian and Agrippa might have passed through the area on their way to clash with Cleopatra and Mark Antony. The place could also be the lost capital of the ancient kingdom of Lynkestis or Lyncus. Some experts think that a major city in Upper Macedonia could be where Clean Eurydice was born. That powerful lady gave birth to Philip II of Macedon, who took over Lynkestis in the 4th century BCE. The Kingdom of Macedon became independent, and thanks to it, the son of Philip II, Alexander the Great, later became the king of the Macedonian Empire. That man totally lived up to his name. In just 13 years, he created one of the biggest empires in history, stretching from Greece all the way to Egypt and India. And he managed to do all that before passing away at just 32 years old. Researchers plan to dig deeper into this important site to learn more about the early civilizations of Europe. This incredible discovery was possible thanks to LiDAR. This remote sensing tool helps map things like how tall plants are, how thick forests are, and other details across big areas. LiDAR is an active system, meaning it creates its own energy, in this case light, to scan the ground. A laser fires super fast pulses of light that shoot down to the ground and bounce off things like buildings and tree branches. The LiDAR sensor then catches the reflected light and records it. The system measures how long it takes for the light to go from the laser to the ground and back. This is called the two-way travel time. That time helps figure out the distance the light traveled. Then, using that distance, the system can figure out the exact elevation of different spots. Scientists recently found another lost city using the same technology. This one, called Giangola, was hiding beneath the dense jungles of Mexico for 600 years. All this time, researchers believed there was just an abandoned fortress there. There was no way to go and see until recently, when they used LiDAR and got a 3D model of the area in just 2 hours from a plane. Giangola was built in pre-Columbian times between the years 1350 and 1521. It covered 360 hectares and had over 1,100 buildings, 2.5 miles of defensive walls, and a whole network of internal roads. The city had a well-planned urban layout with temples and ball courts and separate neighborhoods for the elites and commoners. It was a crucially important place for the Zapotec people, a group that had lived in the area since around 600 BCE. In Giangola, families lived together in homes with big patios in the middle, surrounded by rooms. As families grew bigger, they would add more rooms and expand their homes. Since Giangola was surrounded by mountains, the locals tried to use every piece of land on the slopes that was good enough to build a house. They even used natural drainage of the area to have water, and they must have been great at construction, as many of their constructions are still standing today. But at some point in the beginning of the 16th century, they didn't have enough fresh water and good farmland to grow food, and moved away to nearby Tehuantepec. Archaeologists plan to learn more about how the Zapotecs were organized, how they ruled their cities, and how they interacted with the Spanish when they arrived. They plan to study all 1,170 buildings found in the LiDAR scan, and it'll take a few years. Another recent find, made with the same groundbreaking tech, is a massive city that lay hidden beneath the thick green canopy of the Amazon rainforest. A whole network of houses, plazas, roads, and canals was hiding in the shadow of a mighty volcano. Many scientists thought that ancient Amazonian people lived in tiny huts and cleared patches of land to survive. But this city, built 2,500 years ago and inhabited for nearly 1,000 years, debunked that theory and changed everything. Now, researchers think tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people lived in complex urban societies. They scanned the area and found that 6,000 rectangular platforms, each about 66 by 33 feet and 6 to 9 feet high. These structures were arranged in clusters around central plazas that had straight roads with perfect right angles and paths connecting them. One of the roads was an impressive 16 miles long. Building straight roads like this is way harder than just going with the landscape. Some of these roads may have had great spiritual or ceremonial significance. The civilization was thriving thanks to rich soil from a nearby volcano. But the same volcano may have also led to its downfall. Researchers also found signs of threats to the cities, such as ditches that blocked entrances to the settlements. Maybe some people living nearby were trying to get in. The next step for the scientists will be to study the adjoining 116 square miles to know more about this large, complex society that could be bigger than the well-known Mayan cities in Mexico and Central America.
Okay, what if I tell you that the extraterrestrials we all imagine as little green men may actually look like very normal Earthlings and chill in Europe? This is the Iberian Peninsula, and people living there are under suspicion. Ooh. Here's the reason. Somehow, parts of the most important artifacts that the Iberian civilization called Treasure of Valena are made of metal that simply can't be found on Earth, because it's metal from a meteorite. Now let's tackle this step by step. This is the artifact itself, and it's composed of 59 different objects. Bowls, bottles, and bracelets. Is there a pattern there with all those bees? In total, the find weighs around 20 pounds, of which 18 pounds are 23.5 karat gold. Now, if you're not a metal specialist, I'll clarify it for you right away. For comparison, 23 karat gold is 95.8% pure gold, so 23.5 karat is even purer. The remaining percentage goes to other metals to help add strength and durability to the precious alloy. There was also silver, iron, and amber in that set. The artifact could have been pretty straightforward, but for these two, let's call them imposters. Look at this wrought iron bracelet and this hollow hemisphere. Can you see that? Those rusty lines on the hemisphere and the overall weird color of the bracelet do stand out, since everything else is made of purest gold. This all started back in 1963, when a researcher noticed a dark leaden metal among the shiny bowls and bottles. The metal was shiny in some areas and covered with a ferrous-looking oxide that was mostly cracked. Now, just so you understand, gold does not usually act this way. Gold is one of the least reactive of all metals, so it won't even tarnish, let alone rust. To figure out where this suspicious iron came from, researchers turned to mass spectrometry, which checks out the mass-to-charge ratio of molecules. Their findings showed that the nickel in the iron is similar to that found in meteoritic iron. Simply put, the bracelet and the hemisphere are of extraterrestrial origin. Ooh. Now, the exact age of the trove is hard to determine, yet it's crucial. We need to know the exact age to see if it coincides with the start of the Iron Age in the Iberian Peninsula. If it does, then no further questions here. But if it doesn't, well, it's, at the very least, weird, if not suspicious. So there's this three-age system. It comprises the Stone Age, then the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Age. The Stone Age is of no importance here, so let's compare the Bronze and the Iron Ages. The Bronze Age began when it was realized that combining copper and tin produced a material that was more durable than either metal alone. This era was all about major upgrades in tools and weapons, but two standout inventions were writing systems and the wheel. Then came the Iron Age. This time was all about slowly bringing iron into everyday life. Iron was way easier to shape into cool designs than bronze. Now, this was a big deal because iron, especially transformed into steel, provided significant improvements in all aspects of life. Tools became lighter, cheaper, and stronger compared to their bronze equivalents. You get it? Good. So, researchers have long debated whether the treasure dates back to the post-Argaric era or the latter part of the Bronze Age. The most recent study claims that those artifacts were created in 1400 to 1200 BCE, and something really doesn't add up. First off, the Iron Age began around 500 years after these artifacts were crafted. Plus, ancient craftsmen couldn't know back then how to work with metals that landed on Earth approximately 1 million years ago. And while the dates are really hard to explain, there is a logical explanation for the craftsmanship. The theory here is that those metal workers simply had access to the fallen meteorite, and thus they could study it well and discover its properties before using it for decorative purposes. They could have figured it out through trial and error, and once they knew exactly how to work with this extraterrestrial metal, they proceeded to adorn the artifacts with it. Plus, there were the Phoenicians, who contributed to their craftsmanship. Now, it's true that the Iberian people have been processing metal and making pottery long before the Phoenicians settled on the peninsula. But the arrival of new metalworking techniques and the introduction of the potter's wheel enabled them to produce better quality goods much faster than before. So, we figured out the extraterrestrial origins of the Iberian artifacts. But guess what? This area is still under suspicion. The reason for that is the language they spoke. You see, for most modern languages people use today, there will always be some proto-language. Say for Italian, Spanish, and French, it's Latin, hence their similarities. But wait, Iberian was largely spoken where modern Spain is, so why isn't Spanish similar to it? Well, the truth is, no language today is similar to the Iberian. Maybe only the Basque language, but it's because of some similarities found in their numerical systems. Basque is classified as a language isolate, or simply unrelated to any other known languages, and the only language isolate in Europe. The Iberian language is unclassified. While the scripts written in it have been deciphered to various extents, the language itself remains largely unknown. And look at the alphabet the Iberians had. Looks like it doesn't really belong to our planet. But hold up, this one might be a bit of a stretch. When the Phoenicians came to the peninsula, they brought along their alphabet to the Iberians. But honestly, the Iberians probably weren't keen on just copying someone else's writing system, so they tweaked it until it looked completely different. Let's just say they took some inspiration and ran with it. While linguists can guess to some extent how most characters sounded, actually translating the language is still completely impossible. The Iberian language was non-Indo-European and faded away over 2,000 years ago. And there aren't any similar languages left to help us out. Super frustrating, right? Yeah. We got over 2,000 Iberian inscriptions from tombs, coins, potteries, lead plates, and even cave wall carvings. But aside from a handful of words, we're totally in the dark about what they mean. Now, if we could understand their language, we might have learned that they were great thinkers and all, but we can only contemplate the works of art they left. Iberian culture has a lot of amazing stuff made by talented artisans. We're talking about not just metalwork and ceramics, but also detailed sculptures, textiles, jewelry, and other personal bling. But here's the catch. Making all those luxury items depended a lot on a big farming class. At the heart of Iberian society, most folks were involved in farming and taking care of livestock. Depending on where you were, the types of farming varied. For example, up in the north, they were all about growing grains, while down in Valencia, they focused on producing olive oil and other agricultural aspects. In the west, raising animals was the name of the game. Still, we don't have much information about the day-to-day lives of the many people doing this essential work. Yet, on the flip side, we know a lot about the upper class of Iberian society, who control these agricultural resources and hire the artisans. By the 7th century BCE, we start to see a group of Iberian princes who were living the good life, trading with the Phoenicians, and enjoying fancy luxury items. You can spot this elite class in their burial practices. Cremation was the go-to method for funerals among the Iberians, and wealthy individuals were often found in cemeteries with all sorts of lavish goods and funerary sculptures that give us a peek into the fashion and hairstyles of the rich. Interestingly, starting in the 6th century BCE, there was a noticeable drop in the number of recognizable burials, which suggests that these elaborate funeral customs became more exclusive to a small elite. Meanwhile, the fate of the majority, farmers, artisans, soldiers, and laborers, who made up a big chunk of the population, remains a bit of a mystery. It used to be a pretty advanced civilization, but it vanished without a trace. Researchers think it could have been due to some massive earthquake, but so far we don't know for sure.